be here.
Oh my goodness, we're blessed to have you. We are blessed to have you here. And Brother West, I know that you are interviewed a great deal. I did my research, a little bit of research, and I listened to a few of your interviews, and I thought, given that this is a writers' conference, and you write about so many different things, I will try as best I can to ask the kind of questions the audience might have in mind, and then kind of slip in a few questions of my own as well.
Sounds good.
All right.
Good.
My background is as a civil rights litigator. I've traveled in different places around the country on behalf of black people, black children in particular, and I've heard many people sing, "We Shall Overcome." There are some people who are tired of singing, "We Shall Overcome." I want to ask this question of you. Given today's more nuanced racism and discrimination, when we say we shall overcome, what are we asking to overcome?
Wow. Let me start by saying it's a blessing to be on the stage with you. And I really want to salute my dear sister, the visionary leader, Professor Brenda M. Green,
Yes.
Executive Director. I really do. She's done a marvelous job. The panels have just been magnificent. Those of you who've been blessed to be here the whole day, and others who were here last night, I couldn't make it, it was in Uniondale, but it's been magnificent. I do want to begin on that note, because I must say, anytime I come to Medgar Evers and I look in the eyes of my dear brother, I know that this place is consecrated. So that's a serious brother. It's consecrated by his blood. And so when we come to a dialogue and talking about we shall overcome at Medgar Evers in Brooklyn, it's of a high order.
Yes.
It's
Yes,
of a
it
very,
is.
very, very high order. So first, I think we have to recognize that there's a radical continuity between the killing fields of the plantations and the bodies hanging from the trees and the police brutality and the prison industrial complex. That it's so easy to think that somehow, because there's been this relative progress for a significant number of black people, that there's been some kind of fundamental transformation, and therefore we lose sight of the degree to which the history of New World Africans in this hemisphere for 400 years does not have continuity. And this is very, very important, especially with Brother Obama running, because things get complicated. With Obama, complicated in his mind, complicated in the mind of fellow citizens, complicated in terms of how America is viewed around the world. So that part of it has to do with, how do we tell the story? How do we tell the story? If you view America from Jamestown, America is a corporation before it's a country. And if it's a corporation before it's a country, and white supremacy interacts with the imperial expansion, then white supremacy is something that is so deeply grounded in white greed, in white hatred, in white fear, that constitutes the very foundation for what will become a precious experiment in democracy called the USA. That's what we tell Sister Condoleezza Rice. She said we got a birth defect. Now, there was a lot of folk called hell for a long time before the birth took place. Then there was a denial. A defect's not the same as a denial. You see what I mean? And the same with Obama. Obama said, well, slavery was America's original sin. No. The original sin was the dispossession, the subjugation, and the extermination of indigenous peoples. That's the original sin. You want to talk with white supremacy, that's the original sin. That's the precondition for the democracy, which would then be founded on the exploitation, subjugation, and the hatred of people of African descent. So we got to get our stories right from the very beginning. Now, we say writers, and it's very interesting to me in this regard, because, you know, I'm a 54-year-old black man in America, and I never really understood myself first and foremost as a writer. That's what I'm so glad to be here. I really am. It's a fascinating kind of thing. I mean, I know Baldwin and others I have great respect for. Toni Morrison, who I love, I was just with her on Tuesday. We had a Toni Morrison lecture with Sister Donica I gave a magnificent lecture. Toni Morrison is a writer. You know why? Because every morning she gets up, she writes. You see, it's like Coltrane. Every morning he practices. Whereas for me, I read. That's why I like the title. Reading and writing to transform. You see. So I'm first and foremost a reader. My writing's just a byproduct. It's a conversation with what I'm reading with in order to teach. This is what KRS-One tonight is saying. It's true. The brother's first and foremost a teacher. That's why Barack renamed himself. Teacher. I'm first and foremost a teacher, but it's a teacher who is so obsessed with the heights attained by the blues artists and the jazz musicians that I've always viewed myself as a blues man in the life of the mind and a jazz man in the world of ideas. You see, because what they attempted to do was to make sure that what you do, the words you use, how you relate to people, you see, how you touch people, be it physically tactile or be it through images or metaphors, you try to push them so they have access to a power they did not know they had access to, so that they become ennobled and empowered in their attempt to live a life of decency. Well, that's what the jazz musicians do. You see, that what they do connects at the deepest level, so right when you're down and out, you have access to a power you didn't think you had. You see, down and out, you listen to Luther. That's just not a ritual. That's a way of preserving sanity. Now, is it possible for our words and our writings to have that kind of ennoblement and enablement and empowerment for people who've been taught to hate themselves and despise themselves and demean themselves and think somehow they are disempowered perennially, rather than being relatively powerless in regard to money and things, but deeply powerful in terms of culture and spirit and love and so forth and so on. So that's the framework by which I come to this question of what it means we overcome.
Okay.
We got a whole lot of, I mean, the first thing we got to overcome is, because really the very important thing is you can't talk about trying to overcome something unless you get the lies out of the way. Because what truth is all about is allowing suffering to speak, and suffering can't speak if the lies and mendacities are hemorrhaging and suffocating those voices in such a way that they don't count. I'll give you an example of what I have in mind. There was a brother I used to have these wonderful dialogues with, just like you. His name was William Buckley. He had me on firing line about 6 times. And boy, we had some good times. We had some dialogue. He said, "Oh, Brother West, you got that rhetorical power. That's just amazing me." I said, "Oh, thank you very much." But let me show you how far we haven't come. Because he died recently. You recall?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
He died recently. There were obituaries all around the country, long essays on the front page of either Time or Newsweek. I forget which one. And there was not one mention of the fact that he supported in an unadulterated way apartheid in America and apartheid in South Africa. No mention of it. Now, what does that mean? It means that given all the work that we writers and musicians and so forth have had, we haven't shaped the public discourse in such a way that black people count and black suffering matters enough so that when they reflect on one of their writers, they have to mention that he was Nazi-like when it came to black suffering. He actually supported not just Jim Crow, he supported American terrorism, because that's what Jim Crow was. Now, he's applauded because he supported Jews in Soviet Union. That's a beautiful thing. I support Jews in anti-Semitic Soviet Union too. He supported the victims in communist regimes. I support victims in communist regimes too. But what about precious black people? Not a mumbling word. But you can rest be assured, when some of our black leaders pass, you can say one word that's perceived as xenophobic is going to be at the center of your obituary. No major support, no major affirmation of a system of life that dehumanizes people, but is part of your baggage for life. That's how far we haven't come in terms of the weight and gravitas of the lies, of the mendacity and the hypocrisy. So that before we start talking about just we shall overcome in terms of getting this next job and passing this next law, we got to make sure we got the story in place right. And that's what's so magnificent about this conference, because we got to tell the younger generation, John Killens and others, that there was a group of folk in the 1960s like Eugene Redmond and Baraka and Sonia Sanchez and others who loved black people enough and wanted to cast a limelight on black suffering enough and highlight black people counting enough that in their writings and through all of their various actions, they were going to bear witness. Because our young folk more and more distant from that. They wonder how much we really love them. Because we've been telling them overcome means going to some dynamite college, getting this magnificent skill, living large in some vanilla suburb. American success. See that? That's not part of the story for me. At least it's not the center of the story. It is part of the story. I mean, it is part of the story. I know Brother Jay-Z from Marcy Projects here in Brooklyn. I went into his place in Manhattan. I had tears in my eyes because I know where it comes from, and I know it's lyrical genius. But at the same time, I told the brother, I said, are you successful now? But are you great? Ah, that's something else. You know you come from a people whose greatness has quality of service to others, depth of love to others. Yes. That's the criteria of greatness. Yes. I revel in your success, but are you great? One of the things I love about Professor Green is y'all know that she's part of the first family of American, Afro-American culture, because her son Talib Kweli is a lyrical genius. Y'all know that, right? Y'all know that. And y'all know her other son Jamal is going to be professor at Columbia Law School. And she only got 2. That's 2 out of 2 right there. That's 2 home runs. But they understand the connection between success and greatness. You go into those places with all of your sophisticated skills and things, and you interact. You teach, you learn, you listen, you give, you take. But then you also bear witness. Then you also have a quality of service, you see. And if we can't pass that on to the younger generation, any talk about we shall overcome, it's going to be misconstrued. Misconstrued. You see successful Negroes now in high places smiling, singing, we shall overcome. I say, no, you don't understand the meaning of the song. You ought to be singing, you're making it. That's a different kind of song. I made it, I made it, I made it. I'm happy, I'm happy, I'm happy, I made it. That's not we shall overcome. That's you made it. That's very different. A lot of your cousins haven't made it.